The morning mist clung to the ancient towers of Raven's Hollow Palace like secrets refusing to be revealed. Inside the grand stone walls that had witnessed centuries of royal intrigue, another chapter of palace drama was about to unfold. Princess Isabella stood at her bedroom window, watching the gardeners tend to the rose gardens below. Her fingers traced patterns on the cold glass as she thought about the conversation she had overheard the night before. Isabella had always been different from the other members of the royal family of Astoria. Where her older brother, Prince Alexander, was bold and commanding, she was thoughtful and observant. Where her sister-in-law, Duchess Margareta, was loud and attention-seeking, Isabella preferred quiet corners and meaningful conversations. But it was precisely this quiet nature that had led her to overhear something that would change everything.
The previous evening, Isabella had been returning from the library when she heard voices coming from the blue drawing room. The door was slightly open, and she recognized the sharp tone of Duchess Margareta immediately.
What she heard next made her blood run cold. Margareta was speaking to someone on the phone, her voice dripping with malice as she described her plans to humiliate Duchess Sophie, Alexander's younger sister who had recently married into a neighboring royal family. Sophia had always been kind to everyone in the palace. She was gentle, charitable, and genuinely cared about the people of Astoria. Unlike Margareta, who had married into the family 5 years ago and had gradually grown more bitter and competitive, Sophia never sought the spotlight. She worked quietly with various charities, visited hospitals without media attention, and treated the palace staff with genuine respect and warmth. But apparently this very kindness had made Sophia a target for Margareta's jealousy. As Isabella listened in horror, she heard Margareta detailing a cruel plan to embarrass Sophia at the upcoming state banquet. The plan involved spreading false rumors about Sophia's charity work, suggesting she was using donated funds inappropriately. Margareta had even arranged for certain members of the press to ask pointed questions designed to put Sophia in an impossible position. Isabella's hands had shaken as she listened to Margareta laugh about how this would finally put Sophia in her place. The Duchess had grown increasingly resentful of the positive attention Sophia received from both the public and other royal family members. While Margareta's public appearances often felt forced and calculated, Sophia's genuine warmth shone through in every interaction. After hearing enough, Isabella had quietly retreated to her room, her mind racing. She knew she had to do something to protect Sophia, but she also understood the delicate nature of palace politics. Direct confrontation with Margareta would likely backfire, and telling Sophia might only cause her unnecessary anxiety before the banquet. That's when Isabella remembered the small recording device she had been given by her security detail for emergencies. It was designed to capture evidence if she ever found herself in danger, but Isabella realized it could serve another purpose entirely. If she could somehow record Margareta's plans, she would have proof of the Duchess's cruel intentions. The next morning, Isabella made her decision. She would find a way to get Margareta to repeat her plans while the recording device was hidden nearby. It was risky, but Sophia deserved to know what she was facing, and the family needed to understand Margareta's true character. Isabella spent the morning observing Margareta's routine. The Duchess typically took her coffee in the morning room around 10 o'clock, often making phone calls to coordinate her various social and charitable commitments. Isabella noticed that Margareta was particularly chatty with her personal assistant, Lady Catherine, who seemed to share her employer's taste for gossip and subtle cruelty. Around 9:30, Isabella positioned herself in the adjacent breakfast room, where she could hear conversations from the morning room through the shared wall. She activated the small recording device and waited. Her heart pounded as she pretended to read a book while straining to listen for Margareta's voice. She didn't have to wait long. At precisely 10 o'clock, Margareta entered the morning room, her heels clicking sharply against the marble floor. Isabella heard the rustle of papers and the clink of porcelain as the Duchess settled in with her morning coffee. Soon, Lady Catherine joined her, and their conversation quickly turned to the upcoming state banquet. Isabella's hands grew clammy as she listened to Margareta outline her plan in even more detail than the night before. The Duchess had clearly been busy, having arranged for 3 different journalists to attend the banquet with specific questions prepared. She had also contacted certain members of Parliament who had previously expressed concerns about royal spending, hoping to create a coordinated attack on Sophia's reputation. What made the conversation even more chilling was the obvious pleasure Margareta took in describing her scheme. She laughed as she imagined Sophia's confusion and embarrassment when faced with accusations she couldn't properly defend against. Lady Catherine encouraged her, adding suggestions for making the situation even more humiliating. Isabella felt sick listening to the cruelty in Margareta's voice. This wasn't just about rivalry or competition. It was about deliberately destroying someone's reputation and causing genuine harm to a person who had never done anything but show kindness to everyone around her. As the conversation continued, Isabella learned that Margareta had been planning this for months. The Duchess had been carefully collecting any information that could be twisted to make Sophia look bad, including private conversations and innocent interactions that could be misinterpreted. She had even gone so far as to befriend some of the staff members who worked closely with Sophia, not out of genuine interest, but to gather intelligence for her campaign of harassment. The recording device captured every word as Margareta detailed how she planned to time the questions during the banquet to cause maximum embarrassment. She knew that Sophia, being naturally shy and unprepared for such an attack, would likely stumble in her responses, making her appear guilty even if she had done nothing wrong. But what shocked Isabella most was when Margareta began discussing her longer-term goals. This attack on Sophia was just the beginning. The Duchess saw herself as the true leader of the family's charitable efforts and believed that bringing down Sophia would clear the way for her own ambitions. She spoke about wanting to be seen as the most important female member of the royal family, despite the fact that Queen Mother Elisabetta still held that position with grace and wisdom earned over decades of service. Isabella realized that Margareta's jealousy ran much deeper than simple sibling rivalry. The Duchess seemed to genuinely believe that she deserved more attention and recognition than she received, and she was willing to destroy others to get it. This made her not just a threat to Sophia, but potentially to other family members as well. As the conversation finally wound down, Isabella carefully turned off the recording device and slipped it into her pocket. She had everything she needed to expose Margareta's plan, but now she faced the difficult question of what to do with the information. Her first instinct was to go directly to Sophia, but Isabella knew that might not be the best approach. Sophia was naturally trusting and might find it hard to believe that someone in the family could be so deliberately cruel. There was also the risk that Sophia might confront Margareta directly, which could lead to an even worse situation. Isabella considered approaching her brother Alexander, but she knew he was often caught in the middle of family politics and might prefer to handle things quietly rather than address the underlying problem. The Queen Mother was wise and experienced, but she was also getting older and might not have the energy to deal with such a complex family conflict. That's when Isabella thought of Prince William, Alexander's younger brother and heir to the throne. William was known for his strong sense of justice and his protective nature toward family members. Unlike Alexander, who sometimes avoided confrontation, William was willing to take decisive action when necessary. He was also close to Sophia and would be genuinely concerned about protecting her from harm. She would take the recording to William and let him decide how to handle the situation. As the future king, he would understand both the need to protect Sophia and the importance of addressing Margareta's behavior before it could cause more damage to the family. But as Isabella prepared to seek out William, she couldn't help but wonder about the broader implications of what she had discovered. If Margareta was willing to go to such lengths to harm Sophia, what else might she be capable of? And how many other family members might be at risk from her jealousy and ambition? The palace had always been a place of complex relationships and carefully balanced power dynamics, but Isabella realized that Margareta's presence had introduced a new level of toxicity. The Duchess wasn't just competing for attention or status. She was actively working to harm others, and she seemed to take genuine pleasure in the process. As Isabella walked through the corridors toward William's private office, the recording device felt heavy in her pocket. She was carrying evidence that could potentially tear the family apart, but she was also carrying the key to protecting Sophia and possibly preventing future harm to others. The ancient stones of Ravenshollow Palace had seen many secrets over the centuries, but few as potentially explosive as the one Isabella now carried. The conversation she was about to have with William would set in motion a series of events that would change the dynamics of the royal family forever. Isabella knocked on William's door, her heart pounding with nervous energy. Whatever happened next, she knew there would be no going back. The truth was about to come out, and everyone in the palace would have to face the reality of who Duchess Margareta really was beneath her polished public facade. The door opened, and William's warm smile greeted her, completely unaware that his sister was about to reveal a secret that would shake the foundations of their family. Isabella took a deep breath, knowing that the next few minutes would change everything for all of them. Prince William set down his morning tea and looked at his sister Isabella with growing concern. Something was clearly troubling her deeply. In all their years together, he had rarely seen her so agitated and uncertain. Isabella was typically the calm, collected member of their family, the one who observed quietly and offered wisdom when others were too caught up in emotion to think clearly. "Isabella, please sit down," William said gently, gesturing to the comfortable armchair near his desk. His private study was a warm, inviting space filled with books, family photographs, and mementos from his travels representing Astoria around the world. Unlike the formal staterooms, this was a place where he could be himself rather than playing the role of future king. Isabella perched on the edge of the chair, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. William noticed she kept glancing toward the door, as if worried someone might overhear their conversation. This only increased his concern about what she had come to tell him. "I need to show you something," Isabella began, her voice barely above a whisper. "But first, I need you to promise me that you'll listen to everything before you react." William nodded seriously. He had learned over the years that when Isabella spoke with such gravity, it was always worth paying attention. Her quiet nature meant she rarely brought problems to others unless they were truly significant. With trembling fingers, Isabella pulled out the small recording device. "Last night, I overheard a conversation that made me realize someone in our family is in danger. Not physical danger, but something almost worse. I decided to gather proof, and this morning I recorded a conversation that I think you need to hear." William's expression grew more serious as he leaned forward. "What kind of danger? Who are we talking about?" "It's about Sophia," Isabella said, her voice catching slightly on their sister-in-law's name. "Margarita has been planning something terrible for the state banquet tomorrow night. She wants to publicly humiliate Sophia and destroy her reputation." William felt a surge of protective anger. Sophia had become like a true sister to him since marrying into their family 3 years ago. Her genuine kindness and dedication to their people had earned his deep respect and affection. The thought that someone would deliberately try to harm her was infuriating. "Tell me everything," he said firmly. Isabella activated the recording device with shaking hands. "I recorded this about an hour ago." Margareta was talking to Lady Catherine in the morning room. As Margareta's voice filled the study, William's face grew darker with each passing minute. He listened to the detailed plan to ambush Sophia with false accusations, the arrangements made with journalists, and the obvious pleasure Margareta took in describing her victim's anticipated humiliation. By the time the recording ended, William was struggling to control his rage. "How long has this been going on?" he asked, his voice tight with controlled fury. "I think she's been planning this specific attack for months," Isabella replied. "But listening to her talk, I get the impression this is part of a larger pattern. She mentioned wanting to be seen as the leading female member of our family, and she seemed to think that bringing down Sophia would somehow elevate her own position." William stood and began pacing behind his desk, a habit he had developed when dealing with particularly difficult problems. His mind was racing as he considered the implications of what he had heard. This wasn't just about protecting Sophia from one embarrassing evening. It was about addressing a serious threat to family unity and public trust in the monarchy. "The state banquet is tomorrow night," he said, thinking out loud. "We have less than 24 hours to figure out how to handle this." Isabella nodded. "I thought about warning Sophia directly, but I wasn't sure that was the best approach. She's so trusting and kind-hearted that she might not believe someone could be this deliberately cruel. And if she confronted Margareta, it might just make the situation worse." William agreed. Sophia's gentle nature was one of her greatest strengths, but it also made her vulnerable to the kind of calculated attack Margareta was planning. She would be completely unprepared for such vicious questioning, especially since she had never done anything wrong regarding her charitable work. "We need to think strategically about this," William said. "Simply preventing the attack at tomorrow's banquet won't solve the underlying problem. Margareta will just find another opportunity if we don't address her behavior directly." As William continued pacing, Isabella watched him work through the problem. This was why she had brought the recording to him rather than anyone else in the family. William had always been decisive when it came to protecting people he cared about, and his position as heir to the throne gave him both the authority and the responsibility to address serious threats to the family's reputation. "There's something else," Isabella said quietly. Listening to Margarita talk, I got the impression that she's been gathering information about other family members too. She mentioned having conversations with staff members and collecting details that could be useful in the future. I think Sophia might not be her only target. This revelation made William's blood run cold. If Margareta was systematically gathering information to use against family members, she posed a threat to the entire monarchy. The public's trust in the royal family depended on their perception of integrity and unity. A family member actively working to undermine others from within could do incredible damage. We need to investigate this more thoroughly, William decided. But carefully. If Margareta realizes we're onto her, she might accelerate her plans or find ways to cover her tracks. Isabella had been thinking along the same lines. I could try to gather more information. As you said, no one really pays attention to me, so I might be able to learn more about what she's been doing without arousing suspicion. William shook his head firmly. Absolutely not. I won't put you at risk. If Margareta is as calculating as she appears to be, she would be dangerous if she felt threatened. We need a different approach. As William continued to pace, he began forming a plan. The first priority is protecting Sophia tomorrow night. We need to make sure she's prepared for what's coming without revealing how we know about it. Then we need to gather more evidence about Margareta's activities so we can address the situation comprehensively. Isabella felt some of the tension leave her shoulders now that William was taking charge of the situation. This was exactly why she had brought the recording to him. He had the experience and authority to handle something this complex and potentially explosive. How can we prepare Sophia without telling her about the recording? Isabella asked. William paused in his pacing as an idea occurred to him. What if we arrange for someone from our communications team to brief her on potential challenging questions? We could frame it as routine preparation for the banquet, making sure she's ready for any topic that might come up. That way, she'll be prepared for questions about her charity work without knowing there's a specific threat. Isabella nodded approvingly. It was a good solution that would protect Sophia without revealing the extent of Margareta's betrayal, at least not yet. There would be time to deal with the larger issues once they had prevented the immediate attack. And what about gathering more evidence? Isabella asked. William had been thinking about this too. I think we need to involve our security team, but very discreetly. They have experience with investigations and surveillance that could help us understand the full scope of what Margareta has been doing. But it has to be handled by people we absolutely trust. Isabella agreed, though she couldn't help feeling nervous about expanding the circle of people who knew about the situation. Who were you thinking of involving? Chief Security Officer Harrison, William replied without hesitation. He's been protecting this family for 15 years, and his loyalty is absolute. He also has the skills and resources to investigate this properly without alerting Margareta or anyone else who might be involved. William was referring to James Harrison, a former military intelligence officer who had joined the Royal Security Team after serving with distinction in several overseas operations. Harrison was known for his discretion, professionalism, and unwavering dedication to protecting the royal family from all threats, both external and internal. I'll arrange to meet with Harrison this afternoon, William continued. I'll give him the recording and ask him to conduct a comprehensive review of Margareta's activities over the past year. If she's been collecting information about family members or coordinating with outside parties to harm our reputation, Harrison will find the evidence. Isabella felt relieved that William was taking such decisive action, but she also worried about what they might discover. What if we find out the situation is even worse than we thought? William stopped pacing and looked at his sister seriously. Then we'll deal with it. Whatever we find, we can't allow someone to remain in this family if they're actively working to harm others. The monarchy depends on trust, both within our family and from the people of Astoria. If we allow this behavior to continue, it will eventually destroy us all. The weight of William's words settled over both of them. They were potentially facing a situation that could result in a member of the royal family being expelled or having their titles removed. Such actions were extremely rare and would inevitably become public knowledge, creating a scandal that would dominate headlines for months.
Are you prepared for how messy this could become? Isabella asked quietly.
William nodded grimly. I'd rather deal with a temporary scandal than allow someone to continue poisoning our family from within. Besides, once people understand what Margareta was trying to do to Sophia, I think most will support our actions. As the siblings continued to discuss their plans, neither of them noticed the small figure that had been listening outside William's study door. Lady Catherine had been looking for Isabella to deliver a message from the Queen Mother when she had heard voices coming from the prince's study. Catherine's curiosity had gotten the better of her, and she had lingered outside the door just long enough to hear William mention meeting with Chief Security Officer Harrison about investigating Margareta. Catherine's face went pale as she realized that somehow the royal siblings had discovered Margareta's plans. Catherine quietly hurried away from William's door, her mind racing. She needed to warn Margareta immediately, but she also needed to be careful about how she did it. If she revealed that she had been eavesdropping on private conversations, she could lose her position in the palace. But if she didn't warn Margareta, they could both be in serious trouble. Meanwhile, inside the study, William and Isabella were finalizing their immediate plans. They would brief Sophia that afternoon under the guise of routine preparation, meet with Harrison to begin the investigation, and carefully monitor Margareta's behavior at the banquet to gather additional evidence. There's one more thing we should consider, Isabella said as their conversation wound down. What if other family members have noticed problems with Margareta but haven't said anything? Maybe we're not the only ones who have concerns. William nodded thoughtfully. That's a good point. Once we have more information from Harrison's investigation, we might need to have conversations with Alexander, the Queen Mother, and others. If this has been going on for a while, there might be a pattern of behavior that others have observed. As Isabella prepared to leave William's study, she felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. She was glad that William was taking charge of the situation and that they had a plan to protect Sophia. But she also understood that they were potentially setting in motion events that could fundamentally change their family. "Thank you for listening and taking this seriously," Isabella said as she reached for the door handle. "Thank you for having the courage to come forward," William replied. "Sophia is lucky to have you looking out for her, even if she doesn't know it yet." As Isabella left the study, William remained behind, staring at the recording device on his desk. In a few hours, he would share its contents with Chief Security Officer Harrison and begin an investigation that could uncover secrets that went far deeper than anyone suspected. The palace corridors seemed different somehow as Isabella made her way back to her rooms. She had always known that royal life involved complex relationships and hidden tensions, but she had never imagined that someone within their own family could be capable of such calculated cruelty. The recording device had captured more than just Margareta's voice. It had revealed a darkness that threatened everything the royal family represented. Tomorrow's state banquet would proceed as planned. But now it would serve a different purpose than anyone expected. Instead of being Margareta's moment of triumph, it would be the beginning of her exposure and, ultimately, her downfall. Chief Security Officer James Harrison sat in his private office reviewing the recording for the third time. His weathered face showed no emotion, but internally, he was deeply troubled by what he was hearing. In his 15 years of protecting the royal family, he had dealt with external threats, paparazzi, stalkers, and even potential assassination attempts. But never had he encountered a threat that came from within the family itself. Harrison was a man who had seen combat in 3 different countries and had learned to assess threats with cold, professional detachment. But listening to Duchess Margareta's voice as she planned to destroy an innocent family member filled him with a rare sense of personal disgust. This wasn't political maneuvering or even ordinary family rivalry. It was systematic psychological warfare designed to cause maximum damage to someone who had never harmed anyone. Prince William sat across from Harrison's desk, waiting for the security chief's assessment. The two men had worked together closely over the years, developing a relationship built on mutual respect and absolute trust. William valued Harrison's ability to see situations clearly without being influenced by emotions or palace politics. "Your Royal Highness," Harrison began, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to briefing military commanders, What we're dealing with here is far more serious than a simple family dispute. The level of planning and coordination described in this recording suggests that Duchess Margareta has been conducting what amounts to an intelligence operation against members of your family." William leaned forward, his expression grave. "What do you mean by intelligence operation?" "She's been systematically gathering information, identifying vulnerabilities, and building networks of contacts both inside and outside the palace," Harrison explained. "The way she describes coordinating with journalists and members of parliament indicates she has been developing these relationships over an extended period. This isn't impulsive behavior, it's strategic planning." Harrison pulled out a thick folder from his desk drawer. "After listening to the recording, I conducted a preliminary review of our internal security reports from the past 18 months. I found several incidents that didn't seem significant at the time, but now form a concerning pattern." William felt his stomach tighten as he realized the implications. "What kind of incidents?" "Staff members reporting that Lady Catherine had been asking unusual questions about family members' schedules and activities," Harrison began, consulting his notes. 3 different housekeeping staff mentioned that the Duchess had asked them about private conversations they might have overheard. 2 security officers noted that she frequently lingered in areas where she could overhear family discussions. Harrison continued, reviewing his notes. There were also reports of the Duchess asking detailed questions about the family's charitable activities, financial arrangements, and private correspondence. At the time, we assumed she was simply trying to be more involved in family affairs. Now it appears she was gathering intelligence. William felt a growing sense of betrayal as he listened to Harrison's findings. Margareta hadn't just been planning to attack Sophia. She had been systematically spying on his entire family for months, possibly years. "Is there more?" William asked, though he suspected there was. "I'm afraid so," Harrison replied grimly. "I also found records of unusual contacts between Lady Catherine and several members of the press. Phone records show regular communication with journalists who have published critical stories about various family members over the past year." William's hands clenched into fists as he processed this information. "Are you saying that some of the negative press coverage we've received has been orchestrated from within our own family?" "It appears highly likely," Harrison confirmed. "The timing of certain stories corresponds almost exactly with private family events or conversations that Margareta would have had access to. The story about Princess Eleanor's private charity dinner that was criticized for being too expensive, that ran 3 days after a family meeting where Eleanor discussed the event in detail. William remembered that particular incident. Eleanor had been devastated by the criticism, especially since the dinner had actually raised significant funds for children's hospitals. The press had somehow obtained details about the menu and decorations that had never been publicly released, making Eleanor appear extravagant and out of touch. "And the article questioning Prince Alexander's travel expenses?" William asked, dreading the answer. "Same pattern," Harrison confirmed. "The specific details mentioned in that article were discussed in a private family meeting that Margareta attended. The journalist who wrote the story had been in regular contact with Lady Catherine." William stood and began pacing, a habit that had intensified as the scope of the betrayal became clear. His family had been under attack from within, with their most private moments and conversations being weaponized against them by someone they had trusted. "How deep does this go?" William asked. "How many family members have been affected?" Harrison consulted another page of notes. "Based on my preliminary analysis, at least 6 different family members have been targets of stories that appear to have originated from information only available within the palace. The Queen Mother, yourself, Prince Alexander, Princess Eleanor, Prince David, and of course, Duchess Sophia." William felt sick as he realized that his grandmother, the beloved Queen Mother, had also been a victim of Margareta's schemes. The elderly monarch had been hurt by several recent articles questioning her relevance and suggesting she was becoming a burden on the younger generation. "The Queen Mother," William said quietly. "She's been so upset by some of the recent coverage. She actually asked me if the family would be better off if she stepped back from public life." Harrison nodded sadly. The articles targeting Her Majesty were particularly cruel, and they all contained details that could only have come from family conversations. The timing suggests they were coordinated to coincide with discussions about her future role in the monarchy. William felt a surge of protective fury, thinking about his grandmother's pain. The Queen Mother had devoted her entire life to serving the people of Astoria with grace and dignity. The thought that her own family member had deliberately caused her distress was almost unbearable. "What about tomorrow night's banquet?" William asked, forcing himself to focus on immediate concerns. "Do we have enough information to neutralize Margaretta's plan?" "I've identified the 3 journalists who are expected to ask the prepared questions," Harrison replied, consulting his tablet. "I can arrange for subtle communication with their editors to ensure they understand the situation. Most reputable news organizations don't want to be involved in orchestrated attack campaigns, especially once they understand they're being manipulated." William nodded approvingly. "And the members of Parliament she mentioned?" "I'll handle them directly," Harrison said. 2 of them are already concerned about being drawn into what they're beginning to see as a personal vendetta rather than legitimate oversight. The 3rd is someone we've had concerns about for other reasons, so this actually helps us understand his motivations. As Harrison continued outlining his plans to protect Sophia at the banquet, William's mind was already moving ahead to larger questions. "James, I need you to expand this investigation. I want to know everything about Margaretta's activities over the past 3 years. Who she's been talking to, what information she's shared, and whether there are other attacks being planned." "Already in progress, Your Royal Highness," Harrison replied. "I've assigned 2 of my most trusted investigators to conduct a comprehensive review. They're examining phone records, email communications, financial transactions, and travel patterns. If there are other conspirators or ongoing plots, we'll find them." William felt some relief knowing that Harrison was taking such thorough action, but he also worried about what else they might discover. "How long do you think this investigation will take?" "For a preliminary report with enough detail to guide immediate decisions, I'd estimate 1 week," Harrison replied. "For a complete investigation that would support formal legal or disciplinary action, perhaps a month." William nodded, understanding the complexity of what they were undertaking. This wasn't just about family discipline. It was about potential criminal activity involving fraud, conspiracy, and possibly even treason, depending on the extent of Margaretta's collaboration with hostile parties. "There's something else we need to discuss," Harrison continued, his expression growing even more serious. "Lady Catherine's role in all of this. Based on the recording and our other evidence, she's not just following orders, she's an active participant in planning and executing these attacks." William had been wondering about Lady Catherine's involvement. The woman had always seemed ambitious and somewhat calculating, but he had assumed her loyalty was ultimately to the family. "What are you recommending regarding Lady Catherine?" William asked. "She needs to be removed from her position immediately, but carefully," Harrison replied. "If we simply dismiss her, she might try to sell information to the press or take other actions to harm the family. We need to neutralize her as a threat while gathering evidence about her full involvement." Harrison had clearly been thinking strategically about all aspects of the situation. "I recommend we transfer her to a position where she has no access to family information, officially for performance reasons. Meanwhile, we monitor her communications and activities to see if she makes contact with outside parties." William agreed with the approach, though he realized it meant they would need to be extremely careful about their own communications and activities. If Lady Catherine suspected she was being investigated, she might warn Margaretta or take other defensive actions. "How do we handle Margaretta herself during the investigation?" William asked. "We can't let her know we're on to her, but we also can't allow her to continue gathering information or planning attacks." Harrison had been considering this challenge as well. "We need to limit her access to sensitive information without making it obvious. I suggest we begin excluding her from certain family meetings, ostensibly for scheduling or relevance reasons. We also need to be more careful about what's discussed when she's present." William realized this would require coordination with other family members, which meant expanding the circle of people who knew about the investigation. Who else needs to be brought into this? Prince Alexander will need to know, since he's married to the subject of our investigation, Harrison said carefully. "The Queen Mother should be informed both because she's a target and because her wisdom could guide our decisions. Princess Eleanor might be helpful since she has a good sense of people's motivations." William agreed, though he dreaded the conversations ahead. Telling Alexander that his wife had been systematically betraying the family would be devastating. The Queen Mother would be hurt, but probably not surprised, given her long experience with palace intrigue.
Eleanor would be angry and want immediate action, which could complicate their careful investigation. Let's start with Alexander, William decided. He deserves to know what we've discovered, and we'll need his cooperation to handle this properly. Harrison nodded. I recommend we brief him immediately after tomorrow's banquet. That will give us time to see how Margareta reacts when her plan fails, and we can observe whether she tries to adapt or escalate. As their meeting concluded, both men understood they were facing one of the most serious internal threats the royal family had encountered in decades. The betrayal wasn't just personal. It threatened the entire institution of the monarchy by undermining public trust and family unity. James, William said as Harrison prepared to leave, I want you to know how much I appreciate your discretion and professionalism in handling this situation. This could destroy our family if it's not managed carefully. Harrison stood and gathered his files. Your Royal Highness, protecting this family from all threats is my duty and my honor. We will get through this, but it's going to require careful planning and decisive action when the time is right. As Harrison left the office, William remained behind, staring out the window at the palace gardens where he had played as a child. Those simpler times felt very far away now. Tomorrow night's state banquet would be just the beginning of a complex process that would test every member of his family and potentially reshape the monarchy for future generations. The ancient palace walls had witnessed many crises over the centuries, but few had originated from such a fundamental betrayal of trust. William knew that how they handled the next few days would determine not just Margareta's fate, but the future integrity and stability of the entire royal family. The grand ballroom of Raven's Hollow Palace had never looked more magnificent. Crystal chandeliers cast dancing light across the golden walls, while hundreds of candles reflected in the polished marble floors. The state banquet was one of the most important events on the royal calendar, bringing together diplomats, government officials, business leaders, and carefully selected members of the press from across Astoria and neighboring kingdoms. Duchess Sophie stood in her private dressing room, adjusting her sapphire necklace with trembling fingers. She had been unusually nervous all day, though she couldn't quite understand why. The communications team had given her an extensive briefing about potential topics that might arise during conversations with guests, including detailed preparation for questions about her charitable work. While the briefing was supposedly routine, something about the intensity and specificity of the preparation had left her feeling uneasy. Her lady-in-waiting, Mrs. Corpus Career, Elizabeth Hartwell, noticed Sophia's nervousness. Your Grace, you look absolutely radiant. The royal blue gown is perfect with your coloring, and your charity work speaks for itself. There's nothing to worry about tonight. Sophia smiled gratefully at the older woman's reassurance. Mrs. Bowell. Hartwell had been with the royal household for 25 years and had a remarkable ability to calm nervous family members before public events. Thank you, Elizabeth. I suppose I'm just feeling the weight of representing the family well tonight. What Sophia didn't know was that Mrs. Hartwell had been discreetly briefed by Chief Security Officer Harrison about potential challenges during the evening. The loyal lady-in-waiting had been asked to stay close to Sophia throughout the banquet and to signal security if any conversations seemed to be becoming hostile or inappropriate. Meanwhile, in another wing of the palace, Duchess Margareta was putting the finishing touches on her own preparation. Unlike Sophia's nervous energy, Margareta radiated confident anticipation. She had spent weeks coordinating every detail of what she expected to be Sophia's public humiliation, and she could barely contain her excitement about finally seeing her plans come to fruition. Lady Catherine knocked softly on Margareta's door before entering with a final briefing. Your Grace, I've confirmed that all 3 journalists are in attendance tonight. Mr. Pemberton from the Herald, Ms. Richardson from the Tribune, and Mr. Walsh from the Independent. They've all been briefed on the questions to ask and the timing. Margareta smiled with cruel satisfaction. Perfect.
And the parliamentarians? Lord Ashford and Sir Geoffrey are both here, Catherine confirmed. Lord Ashford seems a bit uncomfortable about the whole arrangement, but Sir Geoffrey is quite enthusiastic.
He's been making pointed comments about royal spending to other guests already. Margareta felt a momentary flicker of concern about Lord Ashford's hesitation, but she dismissed it. Once the questioning began and Sophia started stumbling in her responses, everyone would see how unprepared and possibly corrupt the beloved Duchess really was. Remember, Margareta instructed Catherine, we need to time this carefully. The questions should start during the reception period, when there are plenty of witnesses but before the formal dinner begins. That will give the story maximum impact without disrupting the entire event.
Catherine nodded, though she had been feeling increasingly uneasy about the plan since overhearing Prince William's conversation about investigating Margareta. She had decided not to warn her employer about what she had heard, partly out of fear of revealing her own eavesdropping, but mainly because she was beginning to realize that she might be on the wrong side of a very dangerous game.
In the security control room, Chief Security Officer Harrison was monitoring multiple camera feeds and communication channels. His team had been briefed on the potential threat to Duchess Sophia, and they were prepared to intervene if the situation escalated beyond uncomfortable questioning into genuine harassment or threat. Harrison's earpiece crackled as one of his operatives reported the 3 journalists in question have arrived. We've had discreet conversations with their editors as planned. 2 of them seem to have received new instructions to avoid confrontational questioning. The 3rd is still uncertain.
Keep monitoring, Harrison responded. And remember, we're not censoring the press.
We're just ensuring they understand they're being manipulated and giving them the choice to maintain their professional integrity. Meanwhile, Prince William was greeting guests in the reception hall, playing his role as gracious host while keeping careful watch on both Sophia and Margareta. He had positioned himself strategically so he could observe both women and intervene if necessary.
Isabella was also circulating among the guests, her usual quiet observation taking on new purpose as she watched for signs of the coordinated attack they expected. As the reception reached its peak, with over 200 guests mingling in the elegant space, Margareta began positioning herself near Sophia. She had timed her approach carefully, waiting until Sophia was engaged in conversation with a group that included one of the targeted journalists and several prominent citizens. "Sophia, darling," Margareta said warmly as she joined the group, her voice carrying the perfect tone of family affection. "I was just telling Lady Morrison about your wonderful work with the Children's Hospital Foundation. She was asking about the recent fundraising efforts." Sophia smiled genuinely at what she believed was her sister-in-law's support. "Thank you, Margareta. We've been incredibly fortunate with the generosity of donors this year. The new pediatric wing should be completed by next spring." Mr. CSO. Pemberton, the journalist from the Herald, cleared his throat and stepped forward as planned. But instead of launching into the aggressive questioning Margareta had coordinated, he surprised everyone with a gentle inquiry. "Duchess Sophia, I understand the Foundation has been particularly transparent about its financial management. Could you tell us about the oversight measures you've implemented?" Sophia looked pleased at the question, which allowed her to highlight one of her proudest achievements. "Absolutely. We established an independent oversight board that includes accounting professionals, medical experts, and community representatives. Every expenditure over £5,000 requires approval from at least 3 board members, and we publish quarterly financial reports." Margareta felt a moment of confusion. This wasn't how the conversation was supposed to go. This is the book is about history. Pemberton was supposed to ask pointed questions about potential misuse of funds, not give Sophia an opportunity to showcase her careful management. Lady Morrison, genuinely interested, asked a follow-up question. "That sounds remarkably thorough for a charitable foundation. What inspired such comprehensive oversight?" Sophia's face lit up as she explained, "Actually, it was my grandmother-in-law's suggestion. The Queen Mother has decades of experience with charitable work, and she emphasized that public trust requires absolute transparency. We wanted to ensure that every donor could have complete confidence in how their contributions are used." Several guests nodded approvingly, and Margareta realized that her plan was not only failing but actually making Sophia look even more admirable. The Duchess's obvious pride in her careful stewardship and her respectful acknowledgement of the Queen Mother's wisdom were winning over everyone in the group. Ms. Richardson, from the Tribune, who had also received updated guidance from her editor, decided to ask a question that would allow Sophia to further demonstrate her competence. "Duchess, there have been suggestions that some royal charitable work lacks proper coordination with government social programs. How do you ensure your foundation's work complements rather than duplicates official efforts?" Sophia's response was even more impressive than her previous answers. She described a complex coordination system she had developed with government agencies, explaining how her foundation focused on gaps in official services while supporting and enhancing government programs wherever possible. Her knowledge of both charitable work and public policy was clearly extensive and well thought out. Margareta watched in growing horror as her carefully planned attack not only failed,
but transformed into a showcase of Sophia's exceptional qualifications and dedication. The guests were obviously impressed, and the journalists seemed genuinely interested in learning more about Sophia's innovative approaches to charitable work. Desperate to salvage something from her plan, Margareta decided to ask her own pointed question. "Sophia, darling, some people have wondered about the rather expensive fundraising events. Don't you think the money spent on galas and dinners could be better used directly for patient care?" Sophia turned to Margareta with a warm smile, completely unaware of the hostility behind the question. "That's such an important question, Margareta, and I'm glad you brought it up. We actually studied this very carefully when I first joined the foundation." Sophia then launched into a detailed explanation of how fundraising events generated far more money than they cost, with careful analysis of the return on investment for different types of fundraising activities. She had charts and statistics memorized, clearly having anticipated this type of question. "For example," Sophia continued, "and last year's autumn gala cost approximately £15,000 to host, but it raised over £200,000 in donations and pledges. More importantly, it introduced 47 new major donors to our cause, people who have continued giving throughout the year." The group was clearly impressed by Sophia's thorough preparation and thoughtful approach to fundraising. Walsh, from The Independent, who had been most reluctant to abandon his planned aggressive questioning, found himself genuinely interested in learning more about Sophia's methods. Lord Ashford, one of the parliamentarians Margareta had hoped would support critical questioning, stepped forward with what appeared to be a challenging question. "Duchess Sophia, there are always concerns about accountability when royal family members are involved in charitable work. How do you address potential conflicts of interest?" But Lord Ashford's tone was respectful rather than accusatory, and his question gave Sophia another opportunity to demonstrate her integrity. She explained the ethical guidelines she followed, including full disclosure of any potential conflicts and the involvement of independent advisors in all major decisions. "I believe that royal involvement in charitable work comes with extra responsibility, not extra privilege," Sophia concluded. "The people of Astoria deserve to know that their trust is well placed, and that requires constant vigilance about maintaining the highest ethical standards." The surrounding guests murmured their approval, and several people approached Sophia with questions about how they might contribute to her foundation's work. What was supposed to be her moment of public humiliation had transformed into a triumph that enhanced her reputation and generated new support for her causes. Margareta felt sick as she realized the complete failure of her plan. Not only had she failed to damage Sophia, but she had actually provided a platform for her sister-in-law to showcase her competence and dedication. Worse, she was beginning to suspect that somehow her plans had been discovered and countered. Prince William, who had been watching the entire interaction from across the room, felt a mixture of relief and satisfaction. Sophia had handled herself brilliantly, demonstrating exactly why she was so beloved by the people of Astoria. Her genuine expertise and heartfelt dedication had shone through every answer, making Margareta's malicious intentions look petty and mean-spirited by comparison. Isabella caught her brother's eye from across the room and gave him a subtle nod. They had successfully protected Sophia from the planned attack, but both siblings understood that this was only the beginning. Margareta's failure tonight would likely make her more desperate and potentially more dangerous. As the reception period concluded and guests began moving toward the dining hall, Margareta found herself isolated and confused. Her carefully laid plans had not just failed, they had backfired spectacularly. She couldn't understand how the journalists had changed their approach, or why the questions that were supposed to trap Sophia had instead allowed her to shine. Lady Catherine approached her employer with growing concern. "Your Grace, perhaps we should reconsider our strategy. It seems like something has changed." Margareta's eyes flashed with anger and determination. "Nothing has changed except that we need to try harder. If subtle approaches don't work, perhaps it's time for more direct action." The words sent a chill through Catherine, who was beginning to realize that her employer might be willing to go much further than she had initially understood. As the evening progressed toward the formal dinner, Catherine found herself wondering whether she was working for someone who might be truly dangerous, not just ambitious. The state banquet continued with its planned formal dinner and speeches, but the real drama was playing out in the private thoughts and growing suspicions of key participants. Margareta's failed attack had exposed her intentions to those who were watching carefully, while her own determination to continue her campaign against Sophia had only grown stronger. The ancient palace had witnessed many memorable evenings over the centuries, but few had contained such a complex mixture of public triumph and private scheming. As the guests enjoyed their elegant dinner, completely unaware of the drama that had just unfolded, the stage was being set for even more significant confrontations in the days ahead. The morning after the state banquet dawned gray and cold, matching the somber mood that had settled over those who knew the truth about Margareta's failed plot. Chief Security Officer Harrison sat in his private office reviewing the overnight surveillance reports, his expression growing darker with each page. Margareta's reaction to her failed plan had been swift and alarming. Harrison's secure phone buzzed with an incoming call from Prince William. "James, I need to see you immediately. Something's happened. I'm already preparing a briefing, Your Royal Highness." Harrison replied grimly. "I think you'll want to hear what our monitoring revealed last night." Within minutes, William arrived at Harrison's office, his face tense with concern. "Tell me what you've found." Harrison pulled out a thick folder of documents and transcripts. Immediately after the banquet concluded, Margareta made several phone calls from her private quarters. Our monitoring equipment captured everything. William leaned forward as Harrison activated a recording device. Margareta's voice filled the room, but this time there was no pretense of civility or calculated planning. She was furious, desperate, and clearly unhinged by her public failure. The whole thing was sabotaged. Margareta's voice snarled through the speakers. "Someone warned them. Someone in this family is working against me, and I'm going to find out who." Lady Catherine's voice could be heard responding nervously. "Your Grace, perhaps we should reconsider our approach. The journalists seem to have different instructions than what we discussed." "Don't you dare suggest we give up now," Margareta snapped. "I've worked too hard and come too far to let that simpering fool Sophia continue making me look bad. If subtle manipulation won't work, then we'll have to be more direct." William felt his blood chill as he listened to Margareta's increasingly unhinged ranting. "More direct? What does she mean by that?" Harrison's expression was grave as he consulted his notes. "Based on the complete conversation, she's discussing plans to create a scandal that would be impossible to defend against. She mentioned having compromising information about several family members and suggested she might be willing to sell stories to the most aggressive tabloids." The recording continued with Margareta detailing her frustration and her determination to destroy not just Sophia, but anyone she perceived as standing in her way. Her voice carried a level of venom and instability that made it clear she was no longer thinking rationally about consequences. "I want them all to pay," Margareta's voice continued. "William thinks he's so clever, protecting his precious sister-in-law. Isabella acts like she's above it all with her quiet observations. Even the Queen Mother needs to learn that I won't be dismissed or ignored." William stood up abruptly, his face flushed with anger. "She's threatening my grandmother now? This has gone far beyond family rivalry." Harrison nodded seriously. "There's more. After the phone call with Lady Catherine, she made contact with 2 different tabloid journalists. She offered to provide what she called explosive revelations about the royal family in exchange for guaranteed front-page coverage and substantial payment. The implications hit William like a physical blow. "She's planning to sell family secrets to the press?" "It appears so," Harrison confirmed. "She specifically mentioned having photographs, private correspondence, and recorded conversations that could damage multiple family members. She claimed she could provide evidence of financial impropriety, personal scandals, and internal family conflicts." William began pacing behind his desk, his mind racing through the potential consequences. If Margareta carried out her threats, the resulting scandal could severely damage the monarchy's reputation and public trust. Even if the allegations were false or taken out of context, the mere fact that they came from within the family would make them devastatingly effective. "Does she actually have this compromising material?" William asked. Harrison consulted another folder. "Our investigation suggests she has been systematically collecting information for over 2 years. We found evidence of hidden recording devices in her private quarters, suggesting she may have secretly recorded family conversations. She also appears to have copies of private correspondence and financial documents.
William felt sick as he realized the extent of Margaretta's betrayal. She hadn't just been planning isolated attacks on individual family members, she had been conducting a comprehensive intelligence operation against the entire royal family. "There's something else you need to know," Harrison continued carefully. "Based on the timing and content of her recent activities, we believe she may have been receiving guidance or support from external parties." William stopped pacing and stared at Harrison. "What kind of external parties?" "We're still investigating, but there are indications of contact with individuals who have a history of opposition to the monarchy," Harrison explained. "Some of the strategies she's been using are sophisticated and suggest professional guidance in media manipulation and political warfare. The revelation that Margareta might be working with anti-monarchist groups transformed the situation from a family crisis into a potential threat to national security." William understood that they were no longer dealing with a personal vendetta, but with something approaching treason. "James, I need you to arrange an emergency meeting with Alexander," William decided. "He needs to know what his wife has been doing, and we need his cooperation to resolve this situation." Harrison nodded. "I've already contacted Prince Alexander's private secretary. He's been told it's urgent and confidential. We can meet in the secure conference room within the hour." As they prepared for what would undoubtedly be one of the most difficult conversations in the family's recent history, both men understood they were dealing with a crisis that could reshape the entire monarchy. An hour later, Prince Alexander sat in the secure conference room looking pale and shaken as he listened to the recordings of his wife's treacherous plans. William watched his older brother's face with sympathy, knowing how devastating it must be to learn that someone you loved and trusted had been systematically betraying your entire family. "How long has this been going on?" Alexander asked quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. "Based on our investigation, at least 2 years," Harrison replied gently, "possibly longer." Alexander buried his face in his hands. "I don't understand how I didn't see it. There were times when she seemed to know things about family conversations she shouldn't have had access to. I thought she was just naturally perceptive." William reached across the table and put a hand on his brother's shoulder. "She's very skilled at manipulation, Alexander. She fooled all of us for a long time." "What happens now?" Alexander asked, looking up with red-rimmed eyes. "She's my wife. We have children together." It was the question they had all been avoiding, but it needed to be addressed. The children, Prince Michael aged 8 and Princess Charlotte aged 6, were innocent victims in this situation. Any action taken against Margareta would inevitably affect them. Harrison spoke carefully. "Your Royal Highness, we need to consider several factors: the immediate threat to family security, the potential for ongoing damage to the monarchy, and the welfare of your children." William had been thinking about these issues all night. "Alexander, I know this is incredibly difficult, but we have to act decisively. Margareta has moved beyond family disputes into activities that could be considered treasonous. We can't allow her to continue having access to family information or the ability to harm the monarchy." Alexander nodded slowly, understanding the gravity of the situation even as his heart was breaking. "What are you recommending?" Harrison pulled out a prepared document. "We have several options, but I believe we need to act quickly before she can carry out her threats to sell information to the tabloids." The security chief outlined a plan that would involve immediately removing Margareta from the palace, stripping her of her royal titles and privileges, and initiating formal legal proceedings if evidence of criminal activity was found. The children would remain with Alexander, and arrangements would be made for supervised visitation while the legal situation was resolved. "This will become public knowledge," William warned his brother. "There's no way to handle something this serious quietly." Alexander sighed deeply. "I understand. The integrity of the institution has to come first, even above personal considerations." As the brothers discussed the painful details of how to proceed, none of them noticed that Lady Catherine had been lingering outside the secure conference room. Her eavesdropping habit had made her aware that a crucial meeting was taking place, and her growing panic about her own situation had driven her to take desperate risks. Catherine hurried back to her quarters and immediately called Margareta. "Your Grace, you need to leave the palace immediately. They know everything, and they're planning to remove you from the royal family." Margareta's voice was ice cold as she responded. "How do you know this?" I overheard Prince William and Prince Alexander meeting with the security chief, Catherine admitted. They have recordings, and they're talking about legal proceedings and removing your titles. There was a long pause before Margarita spoke again, her voice carrying a dangerous calm. Then it's time to implement our final option. Contact the tabloid editors immediately. Tell them I'm ready to provide everything I have, but it has to happen today before they can stop me. Catherine felt a chill of fear as she realized Margareta was about to cross a line from which there would be no return. Your Grace, are you certain about this? Once you release that information, there will be no possibility of reconciliation. There was never going to be reconciliation, Margareta replied coldly. They've made it clear that they see me as a threat to be eliminated. Well, now they'll discover what a real threat looks like. Meanwhile, back in the conference room, Harrison's phone began buzzing with urgent alerts from his monitoring team. Your Royal Highnesses, we have a problem. Margareta is making multiple calls to media contacts, and it appears she's preparing to release information immediately. William felt his heart sink as he realized they had run out of time for careful planning. Can we stop her? Not legally, not unless we can prove the information was obtained through criminal activity, Harrison replied. But we can prepare our own response and try to minimize the damage. Alexander stood up slowly, his face set with grim determination. No. I'll handle this directly. She's still my wife, and maybe I can reason with her. William started to object, but Alexander held up his hand. William, I have to try. For the sake of our children, for the family, and maybe even for Margareta herself. She's clearly not thinking clearly, and someone needs to help her understand what she's about to destroy. Harrison looked concerned. Your Royal Highness, if she's as unstable as our analysis suggests, a direct confrontation could be dangerous. Then you'll monitor the conversation and be ready to intervene if necessary, Alexander replied. But I'm not going to let my family be destroyed by tabloid revelations without at least trying to prevent it. As Alexander left to confront his wife, William and Harrison began implementing emergency protocols for managing a potential royal scandal. They both understood that the next few hours would determine not just Margareta's fate, but the future stability and reputation of the entire monarchy. The palace corridors seemed to echo with the weight of centuries of royal history as Alexander walked toward what might be the most important conversation of his life. In her private quarters, Margareta was preparing to release information that could shatter the carefully maintained image of royal dignity and unity. The final confrontation was about to begin, and everyone involved understood that there would be no returning to the way things had been. The only question was whether the royal family would emerge from this crisis stronger and more united, or whether Margareta's betrayal would inflict damage that could never be fully repaired. The ancient stones of Raven's Hollow Palace had witnessed the rise and fall of monarchs, the celebration of victories, and the endurance of defeats. Now they would witness a family confronting the ultimate betrayal from within, as centuries of tradition and the future of the monarchy hung in the balance.